People living in poverty on the fringes of mining areas spend every day standing in mud with a pan, looking to find flecks of gold that will help their families survive. Is this gold fever worth such sacrifice?
Gold fever made people do crazy things, like building a town in a canyon with no water and no exit. But usually when a mine closes, people pack up and leave. At the Uncle Sam mine, they didn't pack, they just left. Explorers recently breached this isolated valley for the first time in 100 years. The silence there is loud.
It's almost impossible to tell what any of these buildings are. The one behind us over here, in front of me, has their big stacks, so that might have been a kitchen. We found some shoes, other artifacts, but they're all 1920-ish.
You can see the tools the workers dropped. You can see the car they parked and never drove again. It is a forensic scene, a century in the making. But here is the crazy part. Strange atmospheric anomalies have been reported in this specific canyon. Did the environment drive them mad, or was it something much darker? Hunting the phantom coordinates. In the vast, scorching emptiness between Nevada and California, the desert keeps its secrets well. Most people think the entire state has been mapped, satellite scanned, and cataloged by the government. They think there are no white spots left on the map. But that is simply not true. There are pockets of wilderness out here that humans haven't touched since the days of the Wild West. And in one of these remote corners, a mystery was hiding in plain sight. It started with a piece of paper and a massive contradiction. Alan, a ghost town expert and author, was scanning through antique documents when he saw something that made him pause. On a dusty, yellowed map from the early 20th century, there were 4 black dots, just 4 small marks. To the untrained eye, they looked like ink spills or printing errors. But to an expert, those dots meant structures. Someone had built a cluster of buildings in a deep, jagged canyon south of Goldfield. Here is the crazy part. Alan cross-referenced this with the United States Census Bureau records. He checked the county archives. He looked at modern digital maps. Nothing. According to the government, there was never a town there. There were no people, no post office, and no road. It was a total blank. So here is the deal. You have to ask yourself why. Why would a settlement be erased from history? Usually, even the smallest mining camps leave a paper trail. They have tax records, postal routes, or at least a name. But this place, it was a ghost before it was even abandoned. This led to the first wild theory. Was this town off the books for a reason? Some historians speculate that illegal mining operations often popped up in this region, dodging federal taxes and safety inspectors. If this was a black market town, the people living there didn't want to be found. They were hiding, and if they were hiding, maybe they weren't just mining for gold. Maybe they were digging for something else, or maybe they were fugitives running from the law. The isolation wasn't a bug, it was a feature. But there is a darker possibility. In the deserts of Nevada, military testing grounds are everywhere. Entire swaths of land are restricted. Is it possible this town was swept under the rug because it sat too close to something the government didn't want people to see? When you look at the timeline, the town was active right around the time the military began expanding its interest in the desert. Did they see something they weren't supposed to? The only way to find out was to go there. But it is not that simple. You don't just drive up to a place like this. The map showed the Uncle Sam mine nearby, a claim that dates back to the 1870s. This means the area is old, really old, and the terrain is hostile. The expedition team gathered at a cabin in Leda, a partial ghost town that serves as the last outpost of civilization before you hit the deep wild. The plan was risky. They had to navigate a maze of dirt roads that haven't been maintained since the Great Depression. One wrong turn out here doesn't just mean getting lost, it means getting stuck in sand miles from cell service with the sun beating down like a hammer. As they pushed off the pavement and onto the dirt, the desert began to show its teeth. This area is littered with the bones of failed dreams. They passed the ruins of Pigeon Spring, where a massive stamp mill looms over the road like a castle gate. It is a reminder of how hard it was to survive out here. Men hauled heavy iron machinery by mule train across hundreds of miles of hardship just for a chance at striking it rich. But the team wasn't interested in the known ruins. They were hunting a glitch. As they drove deeper into the mountains, the roads on their GPS stopped matching the ground. The satellite data was woefully inaccurate. A line on the screen that looked like a highway turned out to be a washed-out gully. A path that looked clear was blocked by boulders the size of small cars. They were flying blind. They had to deploy a drone just to scout ahead. Think about that. They are using 21st century technology to find a 19th century mystery because the maps are useless. The drone camera buzzed over the ridge, sending back video of a landscape that looked like another planet. Brown dust, sharp rocks, and endless scrub brush. But then the monitor flickered. On the screen, peering over the edge of a massive cliff, they saw it. A deep, winding canyon. And at the bottom, barely visible against the rocks, were unnatural shapes. Straight lines, right angles. Nature doesn't make straight lines. They had found the location. But the sun was already setting and the shadows were getting long. The canyon walls dropped 800 feet straight down. There was no road in. The old wagon trail that might have existed in 1920 had been obliterated by 100 years of landslides and flash floods. This brings up another terrifying theory. The road didn't just degrade, it looked like it was deliberately destroyed. In some sections, massive rock slides covered the path in a way that looked almost artificial. Could someone have sealed the entrance on purpose? If the town was hit by a plague or a chemical leak or something worse, the authorities might have blown the pass to keep people away. It is a quarantine tactic as old as time. They were staring at the prize, but they couldn't reach it. The team had to make a tough call. Going down in the dark would be a fatal mistake. They had to retreat, rest, and come back at dawn to attempt a dangerous descent on foot. They knew the town was down there. They knew nobody had been there in decades, but they had no idea what was waiting for them inside those buildings. The anticipation was heavy, like the air before a storm. The drone camera saw the roofs, but what the lens missed underneath the shadows would change everything we know about how people vanish, so the team prepared to enter the location physically the next morning. The Canyon of Silence. The sun rises differently in the Nevada desert. It doesn't gently warm things up, it assaults the earth. By 9 in the morning, the air was already shimmering with heat waves. The forecast called for temperatures to hit 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Down in the canyon, where the rock walls trap the heat like an oven, it would be even hotter. This is the kind of heat that cooks your brain. The team returned to the cliff edge. They were armed with gallons of water and Gatorade, but out here, even that feels like too little. The plan was simple but brutal. Hike 3 miles down into the belly of the earth, explore the site, and hike 3 miles back up. That sounds easy if you are walking on a sidewalk, but this was an 800-foot vertical drop on a trail that hadn't seen a human boot print since the Jazz Age. As they began the descent, the reality of the isolation set in. The old road was gone. In some places, it had narrowed to a thin ledge, crumbling into a 50-foot drop. One slip and the expedition is over. The deeper they went, the more the modern world faded away. No plain contrails in the sky, no hum of distant traffic, just the sound of boots crunching on loose gravel and the wind hissing through the sagebrush. It is a silence so loud it hurts your ears. It starts to play tricks on your mind. This brings us to the frequency theory. Some geologists believe that certain canyon shapes can create infrasound, low-frequency vibrations caused by wind rushing through narrow passes. You can't hear it, but your body feels it. Infrasound causes anxiety, paranoia, and a feeling of being watched. It is often called the fear frequency. As the team descended, they reported feeling uneasy, a heavy feeling in the chest. Was it just the heat, or was the canyon itself broadcasting a signal of dread? If the miners lived in this constant state of low-level panic for years, it could explain why they eventually snapped. Living in a wind tunnel of fear would drive anyone to the brink of insanity. About a mile down, the heat started to attack. It is a dry, suffocating heat that sucks the moisture right out of your body. They had to ration water instantly. They took breaks in the slivers of shade cast by giant boulders. But here is the catch. As they got lower, they started seeing debris. Not modern trash like plastic bottles or soda cans. They saw rusty metal, Old tin cans with the top soldered shut, a method they stopped using almost 100 years ago. They found a piece of leather that looked like part of a horse saddle, baked hard by the sun. These were the breadcrumbs. It proves that people dragged animals and supplies down this nightmare trail. Imagine the desperation, imagine the greed. To look at this inhospitable crack in the earth and say, yes, I will live here. It takes a special kind of madness. They reached the bottom of the canyon where two dry creek beds met, Alum Creek and the Uncle Sam Creek. Surprisingly, there was water. A small murky trickle flowed from a source called Poison Spring. And yeah, with a name like that, nobody was filling their canteens. The water was surrounded by weird, yellow, crusty growth. It was toxic, heavy with minerals like arsenic and sulfur. This leads to the poison theory. If the miners were drinking from nearby sources that were contaminated with heavy metals, they could have been slowly poisoning themselves. Arsenic poisoning causes hallucinations, paranoia, and physical weakness. Did the town go mad? Did they start seeing things that weren't there? History is full of towns that collapsed because the water turned the people against each other. If the water source changed, or if a drought concentrated the toxins, the town could have descended into chaos in a matter of weeks. But past the spring, the canyon opened up. And there, standing in the blinding light, were the structures. From the clifftop, they looked like dots. From the ground, they were massive. These weren't just tents or shacks. These were houses, real homes. The team approached slowly. There is a specific feeling you get when you enter a place that has been abandoned for a long time. It feels like you are trespassing. It feels like someone is watching you from the dark windows. The hair on the back of your neck stands up. The wood was gray and weathered, stripped of paint by a century of sandstorms. But the walls were standing. The roofs were intact. This wasn't a wreck, it was a residence. It defied the laws of entropy. Usually nature reclaims everything. But here the dry air had mummified the buildings. Allen, the expert, had expected stone ruins from the 1870s. But these buildings were wood-framed. That changed the theory. This meant a second wave of miners came here, probably in the 1920s, hauling lumber all the way down that treacherous road to build a real community. They walked past the first house, then the second. There were 5 buildings in total, a whole neighborhood hidden in a crack in the earth. It was eerie. It felt like a movie set where the actors had gone on strike, and then Emma froze. She pointed to a shape under a collapsed lean-to shed. It was covered in dust, buried in debris, but the shape was unmistakable. Chrome headlights, a curved fender, a windshield frame. It was a car. A 1930 Ford Model A truck was parked right there in the middle of nowhere. This discovery is huge. It completely rewrites the timeline of the town, but it also adds a massive layer to the mystery. The road the team had just walked down was destroyed. It was barely a goat path. There is physically no way to drive a car out of here today. That car has been parked in that exact spot for nearly 100 years. The tires have rotted away, the wood in the cabin is splintered, but it is still there, waiting for a driver that never came back. It is a tombstone made of steel. The car was shocking, but when they opened the door to the main house, they realized the residents didn't just leave, they fled for their lives. The American Pompeii. Walking into the main building was like stepping through a portal. Usually, when you find a ghost town in Nevada, it has been picked clean. Vandals steal the artifacts, tourists take souvenirs, and bored teenagers smash the windows. But because the Uncle Sam mine is so hard to reach, nobody had touched it. This is the holy grail of exploration. It is what archaeologists call primary context. Everything is exactly where it was dropped. It is the Mary Celeste on dry land. Inside one of the cabins, there were shelves lined with supplies. Cans of food, rusted shut but still sitting in neat rows. There were tools, heavy iron wrenches and hammers, resting on workbenches as if the mechanic just went out for a smoke break. But the most haunting part was the personal items. On the floor, covered in a thick layer of rat droppings and dust, lay a pair of leather shoes. Not work boots, nice shoes. Who walks out of a desert canyon barefoot? Why would you leave your shoes behind? This is the detail that keeps you awake at night. And get this, next to the shoes were screen doors. Not broken, but leaning against the wall, ready to be installed. They were in the middle of renovations. You don't fix up your house if you are planning to leave tomorrow. You don't buy new doors if you're packing up. This suggests that whatever happened here, nobody saw it coming. It was instant. They found electrical wiring running along the ceiling beams. This was mind-blowing. This canyon is miles from the nearest power grid. That means they hauled a heavy gas generator all the way down here to have electricity. These people weren't just camping, they were living in luxury relative to the location. They had power, they had plumbing with terracotta pipes, and they had a car. They were invested. The Ford Model A sat outside like a sentry. The team examined it closely. It was a doodlebug modification, a common practice in the Depression era where people took car engines and modified them to run mining equipment or act as trucks. The fact that it is a 1930 model anchors the date. The last humans here were likely active just as the Great Depression was crushing the American economy. So let's look at the economic collapse theory. In 1929, the stock market crashed. It is possible that the funding for this mine dried up overnight. Maybe a messenger arrived and said, "It's over, no more money." But even then, why leave the car? A Ford Model A was valuable. Why leave the tools? Tools were money. This brings us to the alien theory. It sounds crazy, but Nevada is the UFO capital of the world. The isolation, the sudden disappearance, the lack of struggle, it fits the folklore. Enthusiasts would say they were beamed up. But let's keep it grounded in science for a second. What about a gas leak? Mines are notorious for releasing pockets of odorless, invisible gas like methane or carbon monoxide. But sometimes they release earth gases that induce temporary insanity or panic before dissipating. Could a bubble of toxic gas have risen from the mine shafts, causing a sudden mass evacuation where people were too delirious to grab their shoes? The team found newspapers and magazines used as insulation in the walls dating back to the 20s. They found glass bottles turned purple by the sun, a chemical reaction that happens in glass made before 1915 due to the manganese content. Every object was a clock, stopped at the exact same moment. It felt supernatural. There were no signs of a struggle, no bullet holes, no fire damage. It was just empty. The heat in the canyon was peaking now. It was 117 degrees. The air was still. Standing in that silent house, seeing the dust motes dancing in the light beams, the team realized how isolated they were. If something went wrong, a snake bite, a broken ankle, heat stroke, help was hours away, maybe days. It makes you wonder if that is what happened to the miners. Did a disease sweep through? Smallpox? The Spanish flu? If one person got sick in this heat, the infection would spread like wildfire. Maybe they fled to get help and died on the road. Maybe the desert swallowed them on the way out. But if they died on the road, where are the bodies? There are no graves marked on the trail, no bones found in the gully. They just vanished. Another wild theory is the time slip. There are legends of places in the desert where time moves differently. Areas where people walk in and lose days, or walk out and find years have passed. It is the Rip Van Winkle effect. Could the town be stuck in some sort of temporal anomaly? Obviously, that is science fiction, but standing there looking at a calendar from 90 years ago, it feels plausible. The team noticed something else unsettling. The placement of the windows. They were all facing the canyon entrance. It looked strategic, like they were watching for something coming down the road. Were they afraid of bandits, or the law, or something else? The isolation of the Uncle Sam mine is its greatest defense, but also its greatest horror. In a place this quiet, your mind starts to invent monsters, and maybe the monsters they invented became real enough to make them run. As the team documented the site, they felt the urgency to leave, as the sun was moving and the shadows were shifting, and nobody wanted to be in this ghost town when the sun went down. One last look. The excitement of discovery gives you a rush of adrenaline. It makes you forget that you are thirsty. It makes you forget the heat. But adrenaline runs out. And when it does, reality hits you like a freight train. The team had spent hours exploring the ruins. They had documented the 5 buildings, the car, and the mine shafts. But now they looked up. The cliff walls towered over them, blocking the breeze. The sun was directly overhead, beating down into the canyon floor with zero mercy. They had to climb 3 miles back up, uphill, in soft sand and loose scree. This is where the desert becomes an enemy. At 117 degrees, your body stops cooling itself efficiently. Sweat evaporates before you even feel it. You start to get confused, your muscles cramp. It is the beginning of heat stroke. Allen, the veteran explorer, knew the signs. He called for the retreat. They had to move now or they wouldn't make it out before the heat became fatal. The hike back up was a grueling slog. Every step was a battle against gravity. The loose rocks slid under their boots, meaning for every 2 steps forward, they slid 1 step back. It was exhausting. It felt like the canyon was trying to pull them back down, to keep them there with the ghosts. They passed the poison spring again. The yellow water looked tempting, but they knew better. They had to rely on the warm water in their backpacks. The water was hot like tea, offering no relief, only hydration. As they climbed, they paused to look back at the town one last time. From higher up, the buildings blended back into the landscape. The gray wood matched the gray rocks. If you didn't know it was there, you would never see it. That is why it stayed hidden for so long. It is camouflaged by the desert itself. The silence returned. The ghosts were left alone again. This brings up the final theory, the curse of the Uncle Sam. Miners are superstitious people. They believe in Tommyknockers, spirits that live in the mines. They believe in bad omens. Maybe the town wasn't abandoned because of money or poison. Maybe they dug too deep. Maybe they hit something in the earth that spooked them so bad they dropped their tools and ran. We know the geology here is unstable. We know the water is toxic. We know the heat is lethal. Maybe the land itself just rejected them. The final mile was the hardest. The road was washed out, forcing them to scramble over landslides. Legs were burning. Lungs were screaming for air. It became a mental game. Just put one foot in front of the other. Don't look at the top. Just look at your boots. When they finally crested the rim of the canyon, the breeze hit them. It was hot wind, but it was wind. They had made it. They were back in the 21st century. They reached the vehicle, collapsing into the seats. They had done what historians said was impossible. They had walked where nobody had walked in a century. They had proven the map was right and the government records were wrong. To celebrate, they didn't have cold beer. They had something better, a bottle of warm champagne. It had been baking in the car all day, but it tasted like victory. They toasted to the Uncle Sam mine. They toasted to the unknown miners who built a life in this desolate crack in the earth. And they toasted to the fact that they survived to tell the tale. Most ghost towns are just piles of wood, but this place was different. It was a snapshot of a lost American era, a time when people would risk everything, their comfort, their safety, their lives, just for a chance to dig a little gold out of the ground. And when the dream ended, they left it all behind as a monument to their ambition. But hands down, the craziest part isn't the discovery itself, it's the uncertainty. It's that gnawing, empty feeling of simply not knowing. We are wired to solve puzzles, to find answers, to close the book on a story. But here, the book remains wide open and the pages are blank. We will never know for sure why they left the shoes. Think about that for a second. It defies every survival instinct hardwired into the human brain. You are in a landscape that is actively trying to eliminate you. The ground is baking at temperatures that can blister skin in seconds. The terrain is jagged, full of thorns and scorpions, and yet they took off their only protection. Did they feel like their feet were burning up? Was it a symptom of extreme heat stroke, that paradox where the brain tricks you into thinking you're overheating, forcing you to strip down even as you freeze to death at night? Or was it something else entirely? Panic, delirium, or a frantic need to run faster from something we can't see? And we will never know why they left the car. That acts as the anchor to this whole mystery. The car is safety. The car is civilization. The car is the way out. To abandon a working vehicle with gas in the tank is to abandon hope. Did it break down? Did they get stuck? Or did something stop them? Something that made the safety of that metal box feel like a trap? It's like they just stepped out for a breath of fresh air and vanished into the ether. We can sit here all day and spin our theories. The internet is full of them. Some say it's aliens, plucking people right off the desert floor in the blink of an eye. Others scream about poison in the water or natural gases seeping up from the earth causing mass hallucinations. People whisper about ghosts, ancient spirits that guard these lands and don't take kindly to intruders. And of course, there are the whispers of government cover-ups, secret testing grounds, black ops sites, things you aren't supposed to see. But the terrifying reality, the desert isn't talking. It doesn't care about our questions. It doesn't care about our logic. It is vast, silent, and indifferent. It swallows sound. It swallows evidence, and it swallows the truth. The wind blows over the tracks within hours, erasing the only story we had left to read. In the end, the desert keeps its secrets, leaving us with nothing but the haunting image of a pair of shoes and an empty car. The Uncle Sam mine is likely to remain visited only by the lizards and the scorpions for another 100 years. The road is too dangerous. The heat is too intense. And honestly, that is the way it should be. Some places belong to history, not to tourists. The town is safe for now, but in the desert, one heavy rainstorm could wipe those buildings off the map forever, taking the answer to the mystery with it. So, here is the big question. If you were living in that canyon and something terrified you enough to make you run without your shoes, what do you think it was? Was it a government test, a toxic leak, or something supernatural? Let me know your theory in the comments below. If you enjoyed this mystery, smash that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the unknown.